Hello. Welcome to Audrey Perrott. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
You have, yes. Although I do answer to Parrot.
No, Parrot's answer to Parrot, but your name is Perrott, so let's call you Perrott.
That works, yes. Please.
There's a story there, I think. It's Perrott, not Parrot.
Yes, there very well could be.
Let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Mel Rosenberg. I'm the host of the Children's Literature Channel for the New Books Network. And I'm here with the wonderful kidlit author, Audrey Perrott, who's celebrating 2 brand new books. You've arrived on the scene like the 4th of July. So tell us about your current books, and then we'll talk about everything.
Sure. Yes, I have had 3 books come out in less than a year, which is fantastic and wonderful and amazing, and also a lot in a very good way. And to your point, it can look on the outside like, wow, she's, overnight success, but really it's been, 9 years in the making, from the first draft to truly when I first started wanting to be a children's writer, which was when I was 6 years old. So, yes.
And so now you're 15.
Exactly, on the nose. So my debut book, MOO HOO, came out April of last year with Scholastic Press, and then in November, A Hat for House came out with Putnam of Penguin Random House, and then just last week, BAA, which is the companion to MOO HOO, came out with Scholastic Press. So we have been celebrating lots of books and meeting with kiddos and schools and doing all kinds of fun things to get the word out about the books.
Great. So hats off to Audrey Perrott and to James McGowan, who's your wonderful agent. He's also been on the show. So I keep saying this. I've said this 200 times. I'm going to say it again. The chance of breaking in is less than 1 in 1,000. And to have multiple book deals, well, it's much less. So you are a rising star, Audrey. Before we start on your starship journey, let's just say a few words. We're going to talk mostly about the Hat in the House book. A few words about MOO HOO, the cow that can't stop crying.
Oh, MOO HOO. So MOO HOO was inspired by both of my kids. My daughter, like many preschoolers, had a very hard time pronouncing the B sound, and she loved to pretend to cry to make us laugh. So she would walk around the house saying, "Boo-hoo, I'm crying," except it came out as, "Moo-hoo, I'm crying." And being a kidlit writer, I thought, that is adorable, and I think I can write a book about that.
So we both know now that you have to set up a fund for your child, because it's essentially her book.
It is.
It's actually her MOOC.
Yeah, very much so. And then my son has always been a very empathetic kid. And so his whole personality is very much Milton. And I myself am very much a MOO HOO. I cry at things that maybe people might not consider to be expected, as well as my husband. So there's so much of me and my kids.
Hold on. What do you cry at? I'm also a crier.
Oh man. Really, it can be anything. I have cried at waterfalls when hiking. I have cried at football games. Not necessarily because they lost, sometimes because they won, usually because they won. I just get overwhelmed with joy. I cry pretty much at any theater show I see. during.
If you don't, there's something wrong with you.
I mean,
I saw Oklahoma last night.
Oh,
And
yes.
I needed tons of Kleenex.
Yes. I mean, you might be dead
Well,
inside,
Well,
but
yeah.
if you don't cry with those things,
So,
I'm kidding.
so we're both Milton McCall?
I would say so. I think a lot of people are. And I think a lot of people, though, need permission to be a MOO HOO, which I know I did. I felt all of the feelings, but I didn't let them out as tears because of, you know, whatever, society, not wanting to come off as an emotional woman, all those things. It wasn't until I had my own kids that, you know, kids feel their feelings deeply, very openly and publicly. And it almost kind of gave me permission to do the same.
You know my theory.
What's your theory, Mo?
The people who write for 4 and 5-year-olds are, in their essence, 4 and 5-year-olds.
I concur.
Okay, so I concur is not a word of a 4 or 5-year-old, but maybe it was for you because you started writing when you were 6. Okay, so a few words about BAA.
BAA is the companion to MOO HOO, and we meet a new friend in BAA, Babette. And as you might be able to tell from the title, she does a lot of something. It's not crying. She does a lot of laughing. So she laughs when things are silly. She loves to make her friends laugh. She just is filled with joy most of the time. But she tends to deflect with humor. So when she feels the icky feelings, she doesn't want to feel them. Unlike Milton, who just lets all of it out, Babette stuffs it down inside and tries to cover it up with humor and jokes and pretending that she's okay, even when she's not. And that lends itself to giving her a big old stomachache until her friends come around her and give her permission to feel her feelings. And so Milton and Wanda from MOO HOO have cameos in BAA, but we also get to meet Babette, obviously, and then a couple other new friends.
So one of the special things about your books that I did read is that it's all touchy-feely. It's touchy-feely, Audrey. You know, I write snarky Mel. There's no snark in your books. It's all from your heart to the child's heart, and I can see why people are running to publish your books. And we'll come back to the House in the Hat, but let's now segue to the very young Audrey and talk about your life and try and get some inkling of for our aspiring authors and for our general audience on how authors succeed in writing and then in breaking in.
Wow, that is a big question. I was one of those kids that kind of always knew what she wanted to be. When I was 6 years old, I have 2 brothers. I am a middle child, so I have middle child syndrome big time. And I'm also the only girl. So my brothers did all the sports and all the things, and we lived at the baseball field and the basketball court and the football field and all those places. And I had a lot of time to myself. And so I would come up with all kinds of stories in my head and write them down. I love to read. I was a huge reader, thanks to my aunt, who was an English teacher, and she would visit often and always bring me books. Roald Dahl was really the first author that I was like, I want to do that. I want to write stories like that. These fantastical worlds with kids that were often left alone, right? Most of them were left to their own devices and in situations that they were trying to get out of. And so they would come up with these stories or be in these amazing, fantastic.
So Audrey, as a 5 or 6 year old, middle girl between two active boys, was being alone your angst, being ignored?
I definitely maybe felt, I wouldn't say ignored, but I felt, I felt alone a lot of the time, I would
Alone. Okay.
say. And
I'll take alone.
yeah,
Let's segue ahead. So you started writing. Your writing was acknowledged. Your teachers
yes,
loved it.
they did.
You
My
got
third
support, encouragement.
Totally. My first grade teacher, we would write and bind and illustrate our books. I still have those. And then my third grade teacher, Mrs. Weiss, was truly the catalyst. When we would have story writing time, she would give everybody like 2 sheets of paper. She would give me 10 because she knew I would fill it up in that 35. I have no idea how much time it actually was. When I was younger, it probably was, felt longer than it was, but she would always give me 10 stacks of paper, and she would say, I just know it, Audrey, you are a writer and you are going to be a published writer one day. And I got that in my head, and that was really all I needed were those words of encouragement and kind of manifesting it for me.
Where is your teacher?
I am not sure where she is these days. Although, very funny side story, my second grade teacher, Mrs. Finkelstein,
What's that?
when
You sound like you went to Hebrew school.
it does a little bit, doesn't it? I did not.
And
I
then in
just
fifth
went.
grade, I had Mrs. Cohen and then Mr. Levy. No Rosenbergs in your schooling
I
career?
did not. No, I went to public school in Central Florida. Um,
We were in Florida.
no, true.
The Jewish teacher
But
in Florida.
but Mrs. Finkelstein kept those bound books that we made, and she had a few copies of mine. And I used to work at a nonprofit after I graduated college, and it was a nonprofit for teachers and students in need. Well, one day, Mrs. Finkelstein had retired, and she came and she brought all of her leftover school supplies to donate to a gift for teaching. And one of my coworkers came running in and said, Audrey, did you go to Spring Lake Elementary School? I was like, yes. How do you know that? She's like, did you have Mrs. Finkelstein as your second grade teacher? I'm like, you're freaking me out. What is happening here? And she pulled out a couple copies of the books I had written in second grade. And I was like, well, if this is not serendipity, and if this is not showing me that this is what I am supposed to be doing, then I don't know what does. It was pretty amazing. So little moments like that all throughout my life have just confirmed for me that writing books for kids is what I was meant to do.
Okay. And then what happened? I can just shut up and then every 3 minutes I'll say, and then what happened?
Well,
I mean, I won't shut up because I know me, but what happened?
well, and then, life lifed very hard for a while. And then I had a moment where I was like, okay, this has always been something that I wanted to do. I have this second chance at life. I am going to take it, and I am going to go for it. I'm going to try. I know that getting published, traditionally published.
One second. In your biography, you talk about being unwell when you were 33.
Yes.
Yes.
So I was diagnosed with breast cancer on my 33rd birthday, which is actually 12 years ago tomorrow, because March 13th is my birthday.
Okay. Well, now I have to sing you happy birthday.
Oh, please do.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Audrey. Happy birthday to you. Never done that before on the show. So happy birthday tomorrow. I would have postponed it till tomorrow had I known it. Okay. I would have brought you some present or something. Okay. So 12 years ago, on your birthday,
on my birthday. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had an almost 3-year-old at the time. We were in the middle of an international adoption for our daughter. It was a lot of things all at once. The cancer had spread. And so it was about 2 years of surgeries and treatment and chemotherapy and not knowing if I was going to make it. And when I came out the other side, obviously, it was in the middle of it, you're in survival mode. You're just trying to make sure that you're going to make it, your family's going to be okay, your kids are going to be okay. It's traumatizing for a lot of people, not just me. And when I came out on the other side of it, I just thought I had this, I call it my year of yes. And I'm going to write a book about it one day for probably grown-ups. But it was my year of yes, where I was like, you know what? I am going to say yes to as many things as I can, because it truly felt like I had a second chance. And all of the things that I had been scared of before, I was like, that's not scary. You know, all of a sudden, you know, the big things you were worried about or afraid of don't seem so scary anymore.
Give me an example. I hate to fly. Give me an example.
So there was this person that I followed on social media that had this very cool organization where she hosted dinner parties for strangers. And I signed up. I was like, and you would find out that day where you were going, and you were given an address and what time to be there. And then you would sit down and you would have this fantastic, I mean, it was delicious. Like, they had like a gourmet chef come in, and you would sit down and you would have this 3-hour, like 5-course dinner with complete strangers. And sometimes it was in somebody's house. Sometimes it was in like a warehouse in the middle of an industrial complex. It was so cool and so amazing. And I just really put myself out there to do those things. So that is one example of one of the many things I said yes to at that time.
Did you host such a dinner?
I never hosted, but I did end up helping the creator of that concept kind of behind the scenes for a little while, just because I loved it so much. And I would be like a server at some of her bigger versions of those dinner parties, just as a volunteer, because I continued to meet very interesting and cool people that way. And she would pay me back with a free seat at another dinner where I would meet more very cool and interesting people. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And so in that year of yes, I also finally said yes to following my dreams of wanting to be a published children's author. And I joined SCBWI and started taking craft courses. I started sharing the stories that I was writing, because that, I think, is very hard step for a lot of people. It's actually sharing it and then getting feedback on those stories. And then eventually, when I felt like I had enough that were far enough along, I started querying agents.
Okay, now I'm going to stop for a second.
Okay.
One of the things that I've learned, I think, is that what separates the professionals like you from the not professionals, like I was for most of my life, was this belief that I write really well and disbelief in other people's critiques of my work. It's obvious that when people critique your work, you were able to say, hey, you know what, I'm not good enough. I'm going to become good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yes, part of that I do chalk up to the fact that my day job was a copywriter. So I am very familiar with getting feedback on my writing, and also very familiar and practiced in writing what the client wants. So from working as a copywriter and editor in the corporate world to working in an advertising agency where I had to write all kinds of topics for all kinds of things. And then I also freelanced for a very long time, ghostwriting blogs for all kinds of different clients and advertising campaigns.
Are you still doing this now that you're an established writer?
I do it from time to time, but I get to be pickier about what I do. Not necessarily because Kidlit, pays gobs and gobs of money, but because I want to have the time to focus on my writing. So if I am going to take a copywriting project, I want it to be something that I'm excited about. I want it to be something that, will help fill in the gaps between the picture books and other books that I've sold.
Okay, so you could have gone to nonfiction, and you went to touchy-feely. Is that another?
Well, I do actually write nonfiction for kids. So some of those, they're not copywriting projects, but they are book projects, but they're write for hire projects that I do write nonfiction for kids. And those, for anyone who's not familiar with the term write for hire, that is when a publisher will say, "Ooh, we really want a book about fossils," or "We really want a book about superhero real life dogs with amazing stories." And then they hire a writer to write it, and they give you parameters, and it's all your words, and it's all your, it's your creation, but you're taking more guidance from your publisher and editor. And so I do those. I have 12 of those. Most of them are only sold on the Scholastic book fairs, but they have been so much fun to write, and there's such a contrast to the touchy-feely heart and humor picture books that come from my wonky brain.
Okay, so that does explain some of the wonder of Audrey. So fast forward a bit now to James McGowan, who takes very few new authors, is very celebrated and extremely picky. And he picked you.
He did pick me.
Picky in a good way.
Yes. So when I was querying, and this was almost 5 years ago, when I was querying, I had a very short list of agents I wanted to work with. And James was at the top of that list. At the time, he was a junior agent. And I loved that. I loved that because I knew he was growing his list, and I knew he was looking for new talent. And I knew that he was probably as hungry as I was. And I also knew from
you're not going to tell me that you found him through the slush pile.
No. So it was like querying with anyone, I think for the most part, is a process. I'm very active on social media. I was active on Twitter when it was Twitter, and the writing community there was the loveliest. And so I followed along. I did Twitter pitch parties. But I knew also from his interactions there with other people too. I liked his personality. I liked his sense of humor. I could just tell that he was like, he had his finger on the pulse of the market, and he was sharp. Like everything about him was like, that is the someone I want to work with. I want to partner with. And so I queried him when I had like my first full package of picture books. And I queried him, I believe I queried him with MOO HOO, and he requested more, which was super exciting. But the other ones just didn't live up to it. And so he ended up passing, and still it was a very positive experience. And I thought, okay, this is encouraging. Like, he liked this one enough to ask for more. And I had had that from a few other agents. So I was like, I'm going to keep at it. So I did more craft classes. I did another SCBWI conference. I worked full time and I had 2 young kids. So I would wake up at 5 a.m. and I would write from 5 to 6 a.m. before getting myself and my kids ready. I would take them to school. I would then go into my job and I would work till 3:30. I would then go pick up the kids from school and take them to all their various therapies and activities and things, do the whole, homework, dinner, bedtime, and then I would sit down and I would write from like 10 till midnight. And then I get up and I do it all over again the next day. And I did that for a solid 6 months and came out of that with a new package of manuscripts that I was proud of, that I felt were better, that I was just continuing to grow as a writer in the craft. And I submitted MOO HOO to a national manuscript picture book contest, and I ended up winning the whole thing, which was super exciting. And I submitted it to an SCBWI Rising Kite contest as well, and won something with that. So again, all these little wins add up. And
those aren't little wins; those are big wins.
They were,
and another reminder to listeners to enter contests.
mm-hmm,
you never know when you're going to win.
You never know when you're going to win, and those, yeah, it looks great in like your bio, and yeah, it's awesome to have that in your query letter, but also just gives you that motivation and that reminder that you are good enough, that you are making progress, because it is.
If you lose, I'm assuming you got rejected enough times.
Oh, plenty of rejections. plenty. I still get rejections on submission and people that don't want to have me for events. It's that part's never ending. You get a thicker skin.
I wanted to have you.
And I'm so honored. And so I ended up querying James again through a Twitter pitch party. I pitched a new story on it and he liked it. And then he DM'd me and was like, hey, send me some new stuff. I was like, oh yeah, sure. And did that, and he loved it enough to make an offer of representation. And the funny story is that I was at my job at the time, and he had messaged me to say, are you available for a call this afternoon? And I was like, oh my gosh, is this the call? And I was texting my friend who is an amazing illustrator and represented by the Cat Agency. And I was texting her. I was like, do you think this is it? She's like, leave work now. I was like, I still have a job. I still have to do my job. And she's like, tell them you hurt your foot. I was like, I work in advertising. My foot is not necessary. It was funny, but we had the call, and yeah,
You had the call from work?
No. I had the call after work. Yeah, I finished my job and went home for the day, and we had our call, and it was, we just click. I wouldn't want to do this crazy type of up and down roller coaster career with anyone but him.
And I've interviewed James. He's wonderful, and I can understand why. So now is a good time to move forward to your Hat for a House. I think it's Putnam published it
Yes, they did.
6 months ago. A few words about the illustrators, the editor, whatever you want. The floor is yours, dear Audrey.
Oh, thank you. A Hat for House. Oh my word. So A Hat for House is actually the first book we sold. And it was on submission for almost a year. And I had multiple books on submission I believe I had 3 before we sold this one. So again, even when you're querying and you're getting passes, and that is a long process, you land the agent, submission is still quite the process. And there's still going to be a lot of pass and a lot of rejection that you're dealing with. So A Hat for House, on the surface, it is the story of a curmudgeon house whose roof gets blown off during a storm. And all of the critters and all of the neighbors and all of the friends that come together to help get him a new hat. It's sweet. It has a fun little level of snark that I enjoy. Funny. The illustrator, Druscilla Santiago. Holy moly. So very curious, you know, how she would anthropomorphize a house. And how would she put this personality into essentially a box, right? And when I first saw the sketches, I was so blown away at how it's so deceptively simple, right?
Show us the sketches. Show us the sketches.
So, his eyes are the windows, and it's the shades that are his eyebrows, his eyelids, and his eyeballs, and then the window and the door is his mouth. And throughout the story, for those who don't know the story, every time the wind comes and blows off the new hat that the neighbors or critters or whatever have built for him. So like here, beautiful illustration of the oak tree stretching her branches to try and cover his head, but then another gust of wind comes. And the idea was that it would make it look like he had a mustache with the branches and the leaves and everything. The color palette that she chose are these muted corals and mustard yellows and dark navy blues. The faces on the critters when they get blown away crack me up. So I couldn't get over it. I'm just so in love with it.
Audrey, you're such a kind person. First of all, I don't call that book snarky. I mean, prove me wrong. Read me something snarky. That is it's a lovely, good-natured, heartwarming book.
I think it's maybe the tone that House uses. So each time his new roof gets blown off, and he says something like, "This is not what I had in mind," or "This is getting ridiculous," or when he says, "Thanks, but I was hoping for something with a little more pizzazz." You know, he's a grumpy little guy with a big heart, but he's also grumpy because of the situation.
Yeah,
you know?
I didn't. I thought he was justifiably grumpy.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure. Because he's perfectly fine until this wind comes along and blows off his hat. And then he's like, this isn't cool. I don't like this. And then it happens and again, like any of us would, right? And so on the surface, that's what it is, right? This house that, you know, shows resilience and comes out the other side. And it's about community coming together and helping a friend through a tough time.
It's a touchy-feely book. And Audrey, I have 2 questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
The first is when I read your work, I sense that you have this gift, which most kidlit authors have in lesser amounts, of writing just for the kids. I mean, the parents might, you know, they are on the second tier here. You know, you're writing, the infield is kids. And most of us, you know, we write for ourselves, and sometimes kids will enjoy them. But you really have this ability to write at the level of the children. This is at least what I read, and I'm jealous of that in a good way.
Oh,
And as far as snarky is concerned, I will give you a lesson in snarky if you will give me a lesson
please do. Please
in
do.
how to be kind. At the end of the day, your books are very, very kind.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, authors have difficulty in lauding and appreciating the artwork, because sometimes they see it not as a threat, but I'm the author, I wrote it, the illustrations are by whatever. And I can see how much the illustrations mean to you, and that means a lot to me. And your book has few words. What's your word count?
You know what? I don't know. I should know that. I should have that off the top of my head for all of my books, shouldn't I?
Open a spread and read it to us, dear.
Okay. So.
It's not a long read.
It is not a long read. I'll start at the beginning. One very windy day, House lost his hat. Well, he didn't really lose it. A big blustery gust of wind swooped it up and took it. Hey, that's not yours, House cried. Tears filled his eyes. What would he do? The sun was high up in the sky and House felt exposed. Here, let me help, said the oak tree. She stretched her limbs and leaves as far as she could. So yeah,
it's a beautiful book, Audrey, and I guess it exemplifies some of the things that we have to learn. You should be teaching us how to write for young children and only for young children, how to write lyrically, but only as many words as we absolutely need to provide the scaffold for these wonderful illustrators.
Oh man. When I write a story, that is what I think about. I think about, because I know how much joy I have when I'm writing my stories. And I want the illustrator to have that same level of joy when they come to the words and they think, oh, I could do this, I could do that. Oh my gosh, what are the possibilities here? And they get to feel that same level of joy and feel like it's truly their book. Like I do call them our books. Like I've had the privilege of getting to meet Druscilla in person, and she is just the loveliest. And Ross, I've been able to meet via Zoom, and I fangirled pretty hard. I tried to not be awkward, but yeah, that's who I am.
Show an illustration of MOO HOO also.
Oh man!
While we're praising the illustrators.
So the style that he used is it looks like, I mean, it's very kid friendly, bright colors, humor. I mean, he put so many funny jokes in the illustrations. And I'll tell you a quick funny thing about MOO HOO. So my editor actually said, why don't we send your manuscript without any art notes to Ross and see what he comes up with? And I was like, that is so fun. Yes, let's do that. So he didn't have any art notes for me at all for MOO HOO. So it was a true surprise when I saw the first sketches. I had no idea what he was going to come up with. And I was like, let him run wild. Let's see. And obviously,
art notes at the end of the day are a two-edged sword.
Correct. Yes. I think, and that's a conversation we have a lot in the kidlit world, when they're necessary for the joke, or for the editor to understand what you're trying to get across. Yes. But otherwise, leave it out and let that illustrator find their joy and bring their story to your words.
Audrey, we're towards the end of this wonderfully engaging conversation. You have a book coming out. A few words about your next one, which is on your website.
Yes, so it will be next spring. So we're about a year out from those. And that is my first early reader graphic novel. And it's a series. It is published by Abrams, illustrated by Charlene Chua. And I have seen sketches for book one. Oh my gosh. So I hope to do you proud, Mel, in this one. There is more snark. I don't know if it is
No, Audrey, after interviewing you, I'm beginning to wonder if I should take lessons in less snark. Before
I love a good snark, though.
What the name of your book coming out next spring is?
Once Upon a Tale. And the
Tail.
Tail. And it's two main characters, Wallace and Poppy. Wallace is a knightly horse. Poppy is a very eccentric dragon. And they lived in this magical medieval land called La-di-da.
Which is a good place to live.
Yes, I think so. And they get into all kinds of shenanigans.
Shenanigans. I heard a different word. It's just the internet. And I'm saying, you wouldn't say that four-letter word beginning in SH.
Shenanigans.
Okay. Audrey, before we part, and I'm thinking that we should have another one of these next year when your next book comes out, because I had so much fun. Your books are just lovely for kids. And people who have kids should run out and buy them. And people who don't have kids should buy the books and have kids to read the books.
I have had more than one parent say to me, "Did you write MOO HOO for me? I feel like you wrote it for me."
Yeah. So? And you need parents to say, you know, I had your book and I needed a kid, so I made a kid to read your book. And there's a story here, but we won't go there. Audrey, one last bit of advice for upcoming authors.
I would say plug into the writing community, especially the Kidlit community. We are a very uplifting, encouraging group. Writing is very much a solo endeavor. When you're in your head and you're at your desk, you need the people around you to keep pushing you forward, to keep helping you, you know, with your writing and your craft, but also just to be like cheering you on when you get a pass or a champagne rejection, or just to cheer on all the little things. We know that all of the little things add up to a lot. And so the writing community, I'd say, plug in there and stay with it. We'll help you stay with it.
I concur. I think part of the reason I do these interviews is because I just love meeting other authors.
Same.
So listen, we've been here with the wonderful Audrey Perrott celebrating her new book. I keep forgetting what it's called. The House and the Hat, the Hat and the House that had a hat, the house that thought it was a hat.
A hat for house.
A hat for house.
Yeah.
And MOO HOO, which is easier to remember, and BAA, and more books coming out next year. And Audrey Perrott, it's been wonderful having you on the show. And I am Mel Rosenberg, the host of the Children's Literature Channel of the New Books Network. Now, Audrey, we're going to go out and come back. Okay. So we'll just have a little tete-a-tete. And everybody else, run out and buy Audrey's books and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.